Okay, so here's a brief lecture on cognitive control. Learning objectives for this. The the reading is not from the textbook, but from a paper by Adam Aaron et al. And you don't need to know specifics about that paper for the exam, but the main takeaway that I want you to understand is being able to recognize evidence supporting the idea that different regions of the prefrontal cortex have different responsibilities in terms of different aspects of cognitive control that function is localized with respect to subdomains of cognitive control. So, what is cognitive control? What do we mean by that? Here's the definition from the journal Nature. The process by which goals or plans influence behavior, also called executive control. This process can inhibit automatic responses and influence working memory. Cognitive control supports flexible, adaptive responses and complex, goal-directed thought. So that's a pretty broad definition that encompasses a lot of different processes and cognitive phenomena. It can really kind of be distilled down into directing our behavior towards some goal, directing our thoughts and behavior towards some goal while inhibiting competing behaviors and staying focused on that goal. So it's a broad construct. It's not always well defined. There are lots of different ways in which it's tested. There are lots of different tasks that probe different sub-processes that fall under cognitive control. Inhibitory control is one. Response inhibition, inhibiting a motor response like a button press, is one sub-process that falls under the sub-process of inhibitory control. Sustained attention, being able to watch a bunch of letters pop up on a screen and be watching for when the letter X pops up and only pressing a button when you see an X. Cognitive flexibility, if you're playing some game and suddenly the rules change, being able to adapt to that. Working memory, which we talked about before, being able to hold memories online, actively maintain those memories while doing something with them, and filtering out distractions that would prevent you from remembering that information. And also emotion regulation, exerting control over our emotional responses. That also falls under this umbrella of cognitive control. So the prefrontal cortex, you can divide it in different ways. So the prefrontal cortex is defined typically as the areas of the frontal lobe that are non-motor. Okay, so you've got the precentral gyrus right here, and that is primary motor cortex. You also have premotor cortex, supplementary motor areas here, which you could argue those are somewhat involved in cognitive control as well. So those are sometimes considered prefrontal cortex also, but not motor cortex so much. There are these sulci that divide the prefrontal cortex roughly into these three main gyri, the superior frontal gyrus, the middle frontal gyrus, and the inferior frontal gyrus. You can see the inferior frontal gyrus is further subdivided into the pars orbitalis, the pars opercularis, and the pars triangularis. You'll see these terms pop up in that paper by Aaron et al. And these are on both the right and the left side. Okay, on the inferior frontal gyrus on the left side, we've already learned about. That's Broca's area. Okay. This is a video I'll post a link to in the description where you can see a classic measure of cognitive control the Stroop task. You'll see words that are flashed up on a screen. The words are colors, like the word blue or the word red. However, the ink that they are written in is often incongruent with that word. So you'll see the word blue but written in red ink. And one thing that you may be instructed to do in the task, maybe under some conditions you're instructed to just read the word and ignore the color. And then the tougher condition is to ignore the word, inhibit that very automatic response to read the word and just say what the color of the ink is. So that requires a lot of cognitive control to do that. When you're performing a task like the Stroop task, this area of the brain is often lit up like crazy. You may remember this is the anterior cingulate, and it's especially involved in, you'll see activity pop up there in a wide variety of tasks. There's some interesting theories that are trying to provide kind of more of a unified, integrated view of what its function is, because it's kind of all over the place. But you'll see it activate in periods of conflict, when you have a conflict between some action and some instruction, for example, or something that you, a response that's automatic, like to read a word, conflicting with the instruction, don't read the word. That'll make the anterior cingulate, the ACC, light up. So another task that's used to probe inhibitory control, or cognitive control, inhibitory control specifically, and even more specifically response inhibition, is called the stop signal task. Here's a link to a video that shows what a stop signal task, you'll see different versions, but this is what one of them looks like. And basically you're presented with a bunch of signals to press a button. Sometimes it's an arrow, press arrow to the right, press the right button, arrow to the left, press the left button, and you just press the button as fast as you can whenever you see that signal, unless you get a signal to stop. So that could be like a beep that's given right when you need to stop. And that beep is sometimes given right away, right after the cue, and sometimes it's given after a little delay. So here's kind of an analogy that may be helpful as you're interpreting this paper. Say your task is to hit a ball, and a ball is coming at you, you're playing tennis, and say at this point, your swing is at this point, it's still pretty far behind you, and your coach says, hey, let it go, it's out. At that point, you could probably you could exercise that response inhibition and inhibit that swing and not hit the ball. However, if you are at this point, you're right on the verge of hitting the ball, and your coach says, hey, let it go, chances are by then it's too late. Okay, so somebody with better response inhibition, though, would be able to inhibit the task when it's even closer to the point of no return, or even closer to the point of actually hitting the ball and executing that movement. And so the delay between, if you can handle a greater delay between the cue to go and the stop signal, then you have better response inhibition. That may help you to interpret the paper by Aaron et al. So this is the reference to the paper. This will be posted, and there will be some questions about it. So really the point of this, even though you don't need to understand all the specifics of the paper, this is some skills practice in interpreting some primary literature, some actual neuroscience literature that's out there. So hope you find it interesting.